Continue our conversation with Craig Shirley, author, political consultant, historian. Craig, before the break, we talked about the Berlin Wall speech. In your book, Reagan's Revolution, you say it really began with a short speech at the convention in Kansas City in '76. Take us back to the reasons why and what then Governor Reagan had to say.
Well, this was the Reagan challenging the incumbent Gerald Ford, JD, as you recall, was unprecedented. You'd have to go back to 1912 when Teddy Roosevelt came out of retirement to challenge President Taft for the Republican nomination. And even though Roosevelt that year won 12 state primaries, Taft controlled the levers of power at the convention, so he was able to be renominated. Of course, went on to lose to Woodrow Wilson, with Roosevelt running as third-party candidate. Reagan and Ford go to Kansas City, and the world and the parties and the media don't know who the nominee of the Republican Party is on the eve of the convention. This is the first time since '52 when Taft and Eisenhower went to Chicago and the Republicans didn't know which man they were going to nominate. So that's how close it was. Reagan loses out of 2,257 votes cast in Kansas City. Reagan loses the nomination by 57. Now, remember, at the time, he's just a former two-term governor who'd been out of office for 2 years. Gerald Ford is the incumbent president. He has the White House. He has Air Force One. He has the perks. He has state dinners. He has the Republican National Committee. He has all the forces and levers of power on his side, and yet he almost loses the nomination. The convention, the hall, Kemper Arena, is split right down the middle. 17,000 people, with half for Gerald Ford and half for Ronald Reagan, and the feeling is just palpable, the animosity between the two warring camps. And Ford is smart enough now. The night before, he receives the nomination, but just barely, so he's now the nominee of a divided party, and he knows that divided parties tend to lose in the fall, so the one best way to unite the party is to ask Governor Reagan to address the convention. Totally unprepared, totally unscripted. Reagan didn't know it was coming. 17,000 people didn't know it was coming. The national media audience, the David Brinkley and John Chancellor, none of them knew that Reagan was going to do it. And Reagan was actually turning down Ford's offers live on national television. Then finally and reluctantly, he decides to do it. And he goes to the podium. The Ford people think Reagan is just an actor and he's no good without his cue cards or teleprompter. And Reagan, in an impromptu extemporaneous speech, gives a brilliant paration on his view of the world, his view of nuclear arms, his view of the future. He's talking about the future of the American people. It's something the Republican hadn't done before that, really, is that they pretty much talked about the past and the present. He's talking about a future without nuclear war and without nuclear arms. It's visionary. It is Reagan's heart. It sets him apart from every other national Republican at the time and really lays the groundwork. It's not a concession speech at all. As a matter of fact, it lays the groundwork for him to run and win the nomination in 1980 and then win the general election.
Craig, we want to bring it now to current events. Relations with Iran were tense under Ronald Reagan, George Bush, Bill Clinton. Now, the Wall Street Journal reports that President Obama sent a letter to Iran's supreme leader. What are your thoughts on his actions, alleged actions, we should say?
Well, I guess we'll have to see how that all plays out, is that Reagan was very cautious when it came to the Middle East. You know, in his entire life, he never went to the Middle East. And his one time he committed troops, as we all know, we sent him to Beirut, ill-defined mission, 258 Marines and Navy sailors were killed. It was the greatest regret of his presidency. He said so in his autobiography. He immediately withdrew the forces, and he was very cagey when it came to the Middle East. As an example is that he sold AWACS, which were spy planes, to the Saudis. The Israeli lobby fought very, very hard against this, but Reagan knew that by currying favor, helping the Saudis, there was a number of things he could maintain, you know, some type of equilibrium in the Middle East. But also, the better effect was that the Saudis began pumping more oil, which lowered the price on the world market of oil and seriously undermined the Soviets' ability to pay for their military buildup, because they were essentially a natural resources based economy, and they were exporting oil. And as the price was going down, their ability to raise dollars was going down. So the benefit was that Americans got cheaper gas, and it seriously undermined the Soviets.
Craig Shirley, we appreciate the fact that you can take the historical and put it in the context of current events, especially vis-a-vis our current relationship or lack thereof with Iran. The name of the book is Reagan's Revolution, the untold story of the campaign that started it all on the eve of the 25th anniversary of the tearing down of the Berlin Wall. Craig Shirley, we sure were honored and pleased to have you as our guest.